Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology, and on this channel we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe and bell button. I need to see you back next week. And of course, stay tuned because we're going to start a new series, and I need you to keep watching. All right, everyone, before we jump in, I just want to give you a heads up that we are going to talk about something that might be a bit triggering, and or I'm pretty confident that you've experienced this some point in your life. You probably experienced it today. Nonetheless, if you are someone who have experienced it on the receiving end, or you're someone who's dished it out, it's something that many of us has partaked in, and you see it right there in the title. We're going to talk about emotional dumping. But before we jump into it fully, just to let you know, I likely am going to have to break this up into two parts. So between this week and next week, we should be finishing this up. And if it stops abruptly, my bad. But I need to kind of split it to make sure that I'm not keeping y'all here too long for these episodes. So with that being said, emotional dumping. And as you know, when I'm glancing down, I'm taking a look at my notes, and I like to start off with a very clear definition. So here, emotional dumping is an act of unconsciously sharing your feelings or perspective without an awareness of the other person and their emotional state or needs. I'm going to read that again and kind of insert other parts that I think should be in there. Let's just call it my amplified version. Emotional dumping, an act of unconsciously or consciously sharing your feelings or perspectives without an awareness or boundaries of the other person and their emotional state or needs. What is this really saying? Because that's a long definition, and it can kind of sound a little fancy. But essentially, emotional dumping is you do this without consideration of the other person. How are they feeling? What's going on for them today? And I really believe that there is a conscious and an unconscious emotional dumping. The reason I say that unconscious is sometimes people just need to get it off of their chest. They need to say how they're feeling. They need to be unfiltered. And then other times, sometimes people literally do it consciously, like, I'm just gonna have to offload this, and they do it, typically go to safe ground. They go to people that they consider to be safe in order to share the things that they're experiencing in life, and to share it without any filter, without any boundary, and also without consideration of the other person. And likely that typically happens between two people or multiple, where there's a strong level of perceived trust. And when there's a strong level of perceived trust, your guards are down. You feel a greater willingness to be vulnerable, and therefore this is where we tap into that being unfiltered, where you're able to share a lot more raw feelings. Now, is there anything wrong with sharing how you feel? Absolutely not. You all know that I'm a strong advocate for sharing how you feel and getting things off of your chest in a healthy manner, though. That's the tip there. This can be actually toxic if you don't watch it. And it's actually very, I know a lot of y'all are thinking, what's the difference between emotional dumping and venting? Venting isn't necessarily unhealthy. Emotional dumping can get to a place where it is unhealthy, and so this is like the toxic version of it, so to speak, because it comes with this undertone of, I didn't really consent for that. And I remember I remember a story, experience. This was some years ago, where my friend was having a conversation with another mutual friend, and long story short, this person kept saying, I didn't sign up for this, I didn't sign up for this. But they essentially were referring to another person who did something, who kind of always crossed the line with them. And they were referring to, like, I didn't know that by agreeing to do this, I was also going to get all of these other things. And this is why I say that there's a level of maybe not a lack of consent that comes along with emotional dumping, that you didn't know you were quite signing up for all of this. Okay, so let's break down emotional dumping into three larger categories. These categories aren't necessarily the same, and there isn't necessarily a strong theme between the categories other than the fact that I'm talking about emotional dumping, but instead to talk about different settings that I see a large concern of what's going on with emotional dumping. The first is in person, when you have emotional dumping in person. And as I mentioned, it comes without consent, full consent. It comes with informed consent. There we go. It comes without informed consent when you have all of the information of where this thing is going to go. And it comes without boundaries. It leaves the other person on the receiving end very heavy. And a lot of the time, the person who is dishing out this information is feeling a cathartic release. They feel like they've been able to offload emotionally, and they may even get a sense of temporary lightness, so to speak, because they have done like this transference of energy, so to speak, if y'all remember that from science class. And so there's an in-person where we having a face-to-face conversation where emotional dumping occurs often. Now, in the world of technology, let's consider social media. And this is probably the biggest one. I pause, I have to do a deep breath, because the type of emotional dumping that happens online it's so toxic, partly because of the high volume of it, the frequency. It happens all the time. You may even have one person who emotionally dumps several times throughout the day. Every single bad thing that happens, or every single thing that's emotionally provoking, they need to talk about it. This I'm gonna get into that in a moment. But another thing is, it's available whenever. You always have access to social media, so to speak. It's always at the tips of your finger. You can log on online, or you can go ahead on your phone. Which then also says that there are no limitations on it. You can say what you want, when you want. There isn't this this presence of another person that's there for you to have to consider. So it really removes all of these limits, which is one of the reasons that a lot of people really enjoy and love being emotionally dumping online, is that they feel like, well, there's no one to respond to, no one to have to consider. I can say what I want to say. I can delete it if I want to, but it's always there in cyberland, so to speak. But yeah, and there's even an attention-seeking element that comes along with it, because a lot of people get to go and react to the thing that you're posting. They get to comment. There is a place where this is healthy, because social media gives people an opportunity to expand on their community outside of their physical reach. And then there's a part where it gets unhealthy and toxic, that you are oversharing and you are putting information out there, temporary information, because how we feel is temporary. We don't always feel the exact same all the time. And so how we feel about a situation or a moment that we have experienced may shift an hour after you post what you have posted. And so now, when you're sharing so much at any point in time, and you're oversharing and people are responding, it's coming to your aid, and so it reinforces this behavior that actually has become unhealthy and majorly toxic. Now, again, these are not blanket statements. This is not to say that everyone who talks about their emotion on social media is toxic and they're emotionally dumping. No, this is saying that us as society, we have to do better at paying attention to the things that we have used for or have created for good, how they have turned into something a lot more and have become unhealthy in the way that it's been used, especially because it's been used in an abundance and it's been used without any limitations, boundaries, or protection around you. And so when you post things without, excuse me, my dog is here. When you post things without protection of how you're perceiving or how you're conveying yourself in your reactions and your responses to others, they have all the space and opportunity to misinterpret what you're saying and what you're attempting to convey to them. The third area This is another big one, and I'm laughing because I know a lot of probably the older generation is gonna really agree with this, because Generation Z and Generation A grew up in a very different type of social atmosphere. I'm a millennial, so as a millennial, I had an opportunity to see what life was like prior to social media and what life is like after social media or with social media. I've also had an opportunity to see what life is like when no one was talking about mental health. Now I'm actually not only a mental health professional, but I'm experiencing seeing the rest of the world and mainstream media talk about mental health a lot more freely. And so there are some major differences between Generation Z and Generation A, but also the generations that came before me. It's a lopsided difference here, and so they're coming up in this in society where social skills and norms are majorly shifting. Expectations have shifted drastically, and many older generations might even say that the younger generations lack in social skill. They don't know how to talk to one another, or even people who are in different developmental groups, partly because a lot of communication happens online, and written communication versus verbal communication is vastly different. It even pulls on different areas of your brain. And so, all right, everyone, I'm sorry if that had to pause abruptly, but we're going to finish here for part one. Make sure you come back for part two, and that you give me a follow on social media at Dr. Blaire on Instagram, Clubhouse, Facebook, and of course here on YouTube. And make sure that you are here again next Wednesday for the next part. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with your community, and be sure to share with someone specific who needs to hear a little bit more about emotional dumping. And remember, before you go, and I see you next time, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.